ask the defendant, Marty Tankleff, as to count 2, murder, second degree.
Guilty.
How do you find, as to the defendant, Marty Tankleff, as to count 3, murder, second degree?
Guilty.
You may be seated. You may be seated, sir.
If you see the tape of it, that says everything right there.
We don't know who killed Arlene and Seymour Tankleff, but we know one thing for damn sure, and that is that Marty Tankleff didn't kill his parents.
Only one family member was satisfied with the outcome, Marty's half-sister, Sherry Mistretta.
My feelings were validated that, I wasn't completely off base. It made me think that there was validity to our justice system.
4 months later,
for the murder of Seymour Tankleff,
Marty Tankleff received the maximum sentence, 50 years to life.
I don't think anybody could really understand what being convicted of a crime you didn't commit is like. There's no words that can really describe it.
Over the next 4 years, Tankleff drained his financial resources on unsuccessful appeals at the state level.
The system has incarcerated an innocent man. Something's not right with the system.
By 1994, the only way Tankleff could continue his fight for freedom was with lawyers who would not only believe him, but also represent him for free. That's when the case came to the attention of attorney Barry Pollock.
I'm not sure how that helped.
I had a little skepticism, but the more I read about the case, the more it was impossible not to become involved because it was so obvious that Marty Tankleff didn't commit these murders.
Pollock studied information ruled inadmissible at trial, including the fact that at the time of Tankleff's arrest, the Suffolk County Homicide Squad was under investigation for their interrogation techniques.
They had a 95% conviction rate based on confessions. It was unheard of. It was, it's like top in the country.
Pollock believed that this information supported Tankleff's claim that his confession had been coerced. The attorney also discovered that Detective James McCready had been accused of perjury in a previous murder trial. While Pollock believed these details cast doubt on Tankleff's conviction, the federal courts didn't agree. By 2000, Tankleff had exhausted all of his appeals. The only remaining option was to uncover new evidence to clear his name. For help, Tankleff turned to retired NYPD detective Jay Salpeter, a man known for cracking tough cases.
I'm not God. I interview people. I have my instincts on people. I went over to Robert Gottlieb's office, which was Marty's first attorney, and I reviewed the case. And within the case was Carleen Kovacs' statement, which I found very interesting.
Carleen Kovacs was a local woman who had come forward with information shortly after Tankleff's 1990 conviction, but Suffolk County authorities did not follow up on it. She claimed that in 1991, a man named Joseph Creedon told her that he had been involved in the Tankleff murders.
I did some background on Joe Creedon. I wanted to see who he ran with, and that's how I got the name of Glenn Harris.
Harris would turn out to be the linchpin in what the defense team says is the real story behind the Tankleff murders. In 2003, Harris was serving time at Sing Sing prison and had confided in the prison's priest, Father Ronald Lemmert.
In the prison system, if you are considered a snitch telling about somebody else committing a crime, you can be killed. And I told him, in order for an innocent man to be able to be released from prison, you have to let somebody know what you know. And eventually, he agreed.
At the priest's urging, Harris gave a detailed account of his involvement to Jay Salpeter. He said that he drove Joe Creedon, the man Kovacs had mentioned, and another man, Peter Kent, to the Tankleff home after midnight on the night of the murders. Glenn Harris said he waited outside in his car.
They went to a home in Long Island for what Glenn thought was going to be a routine burglary.
According to Harris, when Creedon and Kent came out of the house, they were covered in blood. To Tankleff's team, it was beginning to look like they had cracked the case. But when they presented their findings to the Suffolk County DA, his staff was not persuaded by Harris's statements.
Mr. Harris has a long history, not only of drug abuse, but a long psychiatric history. Glenn Harris has no credibility at all.
But Salpeter did have one more angle to pursue, tracking down one of the alleged murder weapons.
Joseph Creedon wanted to get rid of a weapon that he had, which was a pipe. So he had Glenn stop the car, and he threw the pipe onto someone's property. I thought, what are the odds many years later that this pipe would actually be there?
If he could find the pipe, Salpeter believed it would support Harris's story. Armed with a metal detector, Salpeter combed the woods where Harris said he had stopped the car. Salpeter did find a metal pipe, but after being exposed to the elements for more than a dozen years, the pipe could not be tied to the crime.
I'm a little suspect of this investigator that found this piece of pipe. We checked everything. We do a very thorough job. We have the best people in the world that investigate these crimes.
But Salpeter's efforts were beginning to pay off in other areas. As the media reported on new developments in the case, witnesses started coming forward on their own.
The detective's best friend is time in any case. Relationships change, people talk, they want to talk later on. Some of the people have changed and, they want to now do the right thing.
Several witnesses claimed to be able to connect Kent and Creedon to Jerry Stewerman, Seymour Tankleff's former business associate. One witness said he'd turned down an offer from Stewerman to kill Seymour a couple of weeks before the murders. Another claimed he heard Stewerman bragging about the crimes.
I overheard Jerry Stewerman say that he had killed 2 people while I was in the Oakdale bagel store.
What started off as just one witness blossomed into a dozen or so witnesses implicating these people through a variety of different ways and corroborating. Each of the witnesses corroborate each other's in different ways.
After 3 years of investigating, the defense concluded that the Tankleffs were the victims of a murder for hire, and that Jerry Stewerman was behind it. Still, the Suffolk County DA's office didn't believe the evidence was credible enough to implicate Stewerman. They refused to reopen the investigation.
When I was first assigned to this case, I looked at it openly. I had no idea whether Marty's new witnesses were good witnesses or bad witnesses. But I basically think there's nothing there.
I'm angry that nobody's ever investigated them, nobody's ever taken this case seriously, other than Jay and my defense team. People have been ignored, evidence has been ignored.
The Tankleff legal team's next move was to take the evidence to a judge. On May 19, 2004, Judge Stephen Breslow agreed to evaluate the new information. His decision would perhaps be Marty Tankleff's last chance for exoneration.
We were asking the court to either overturn my conviction and release me or give me a new trial.
Not only the conflicts, but about we get a new trial because of the fact that they used perjured testimony to obtain the first conviction.
In July 2004, lawyers Bruce Barquette and Barry Pollock were preparing for a hearing for their client Marty Tankleff. The Long Island native had been in prison for 14 years for the murder of his parents. Now a judge would consider whether to grant him a second trial based on new evidence.
I never should have been convicted, I never should have been charged. So to have an opportunity to represent my case to a jury, I think would be the right thing.
Marty Tankleff maintained that his father's business associate, Jerry Stewerman, had arranged the murders to avoid paying over $300,000 he owed the Tankleffs. It was a theory the Suffolk County DA's office dismissed as completely unfounded.
Marty's lawyers are saying that Jerry Stewerman murdered Marty's parents. That, to me, is an outrage. Before they go and blame an innocent man for a murder, they'd better have some good evidence to back it up. They have none. They had none at the time of the trial, and they have none now.
The hearing began on July 19th, 2004. Cameras were not allowed inside the courtroom. As soon as it started, the defense suffered a serious blow. A key witness and career criminal, Glenn Harris, had given a sworn statement that he was the getaway driver the night of the murders. Now he unexpectedly refused to incriminate himself. Another witness, Brian Scott Glass, had told Tankleff's defense team that he could link Jerry Stewerman to the crime. But once he took the stand, he declined to implicate Stewerman. The defense believed that Glass had been pressured by authorities to change his story.
He was threatened by the district attorney's office with a lifetime imprisonment for a pending robbery he had, and after which he was given a deal where he was let out of jail.
Both inside the courtroom and in front of cameras, Pollock and Barquette accused the DA's office of interfering with witnesses.
Once they realized they couldn't stifle the hearing, they went around and tried to intimidate the witnesses. It happened from Harris to Glass and to some of the other witnesses that we called.
The defense maintained there were conflicts of interest between the DA's office, the police department, and Jerry Stewerman. They claimed that Detective McCready had known Stewerman before the crimes, even though he testified that he didn't. And they argued that the new district attorney should have allowed a special prosecutor to look into the case, since the DA had defended McCready on 2 previous occasions.
This case was probably the highest profile murder conviction in the history of the county. Nobody over there wants to admit that they were wrong.
Assistant DA Leonard Leto says the accusations were preposterous.
Only one person was responsible. There is no conspiracy, and there's no evidence to the contrary, at least no credible evidence. The people who are supposedly the real murderers, according to Tankleff, their fingerprints are nowhere in the house. In fact, there isn't a single bit of physical evidence that connects these supposed real murderers to the crime. Nothing.
On February 4th, 2005, the hearing came to an end. Both sides continued to argue their case in the media. Assistant DA Leto publicly labeled the defense witnesses as, quote, misfits. In response, Tankleff's supporters called a press conference.
I took what he said personally. He knows absolutely nothing about me except that I knew Glenn Harris and that Glenn Harris spoke to me.
They've said far worse things about me in particular, and about the DA's office and about the detectives. They don't have any standing to complain. They've gone out and basically waged this media war. That's fine.
By the spring of 2005, the legal battles had been fought. Now it would be up to Judge Stephen Breslow to make his ruling. Both sides are confident that Marty Tankleff will get the justice he deserves.
He will spend the rest of his life in jail, which, in my view, based on the evidence, is where he belongs.
From an evidentiary standpoint, we're supremely confident. We have overwhelming evidence of Marty's innocence and of their guilt. My fear is that this case may be decided on something other than the evidence.
Frankly, I think you should just get a key and unlock the shackles and send him home. I think this story has finally out. At absolute least, this kid's got to get a new trial.
My faith is that I will eventually get out of jail. Whether it's through Judge Breslow granting a new trial or some other judge or some other court, I have a faith that it will happen.
If Tankleff does win his freedom, he says the victory would be tempered by grief.
It's not really a happy moment. It's a bit of relief. My parents were killed. I've served 15 years in jail for a crime I had nothing to do with. So there is no joy in any of this for anybody.